Hi, today we are going to discuss about the best practices which we need to follow while we are sending the traffic to Zscaler cloud. Ideally, in a corporate, we will send the traffic from the internal routers. And because when we send the traffic from internal routers, we can ensure that the traffic will have the private IPs, and based on the subnet, we can create policies. Even the user is not authenticated, and the reports we can see the IP private IP details as well. So always recommended to go with the internal routers when we are tunneling the traffic. It may be GRE or IPsec. GRE and IPsec selection is based on the customer needs and the customer infrastructure. If they have the routers which having the capability to configure GRE and their bandwidth is 1 Gbps up to 1 Gbps, then we can go ahead with routers. And if they don't have any managed routers which is capable of handling GRE, then they can go ahead and use IPsec. Most of the routers are nowadays supporting IPsec. Like you can create IPsec tunnels towards the Zscaler cloud. But the limitation is when you are going with IPsec, only 200 Mbps bandwidth can support in a single IPsec tunnel. If the bandwidth is more than 200 Mbps, then you need to create multiple IPsec tunnels towards the Zscaler cloud. So in the typically the head offices are data centers. There will be a multiple internet ISPs. So you need to create two internet GRE tunnels towards the Zscaler to ensure the redundancy. If you have ISP multiple ISPs, you need to ensure that uh, two GRE tunnels from each ISPs. Primary tunnel will be the optimal data center of Zscaler. The secondary tunnel will be the next best optimal data center of Zscaler as a backup. So always recommended to send the pre-netted traffic. Internet traffic bound traffic is sent through the GRE tunnel to the ZENS. Only the traffic that needs to be exempted from Zscaler is netted and sent directly to the internet. So the few best practices regarding when you are using ZApp and GRE tunnels from the router, it may be GRE or IPsec, and your corporate having the default routes, and you are ready to manage the exceptions on tunnels. Uh, the tunnel source means nothing but the router or the firewalls. Then these are the preferred best practices which you need to follow. If your device is managed desktop or laptop and those are inside the corporate, you can deploy the Zscaler app and gateway uh, underscore fx or secondary gateway underscore fx are the variables which we need to do uh, which we need to configure on the pack files to get the client country for optimal localization. And we should have to enable the SSL root certificates, SSL inspection, and upload the SSL root certificates on each user machines. Whereas in the network side, what we have to configure? We have to configure the GRE tunnel from the router, route all TCP, UDP, ICMP traffic into the tunnel, even if the cloud firewall is not enabled. Zscaler will act as a bridge between the source and the destination, provide additional logging and visibility to the corporate. Configure any exceptions on the router and internal configuration itself. So if you want to send any traffic directly to the internet, then you need to add exceptions, bypasses in the routing and the policies, and NAT has to be configured on the routers. If you're using managed laptops and you're connecting from off network, then the Zscaler app will be the one which um, steering the traffic to Zscaler cloud, where you need to use dollar $gateway underscore fx and dollar $secondary gateway fx variables to determine the closest turn within the client country for optimal localization. Here also SSL root certificates is needed to um, do the SSL inspection. But at the network level, there is no changes needed as the users are connecting from outside the corporate. Managed mobile and platform or devices. You can have the users from any location that can connect from their Android or iOS devices. Deploy the Zscaler app for mobile users and disable SSL inspection for those devices. For unmanaged network like IoT or BOED or guest users connected from the corporate LAN, we need to have the separate subnets for each VLANs and route all ports and protocols to the Zscaler tunnel. Once the traffic is reaching on Zscaler via the GRE, at the Zscaler portal, you can configure the subnets for IoT, BOED, and guest and disable the authentication and SSL inspection for better device access, as IoT devices or guest users may not be able to authenticate, and we cannot install the certificates on third-party guest users machines or BOD devices. So better to disable SSL inspection and authentication for those subnets. The next option is I have the default route on my corporate, but I'm gonna manage exceptions at host levels. So how will you manage the exceptions on host level? You need to have a pack file on your infrastructure, and the pack file will do the exceptions. Let's say the user is connected from a managed desktop, laptop, or servers. The location is considered as a corporate location. Deploy the Zscaler app with SSL. Corporate locations, the variables like forward the traffic to global SYN you on the Zscaler ZIP pack file. For unknown location, return the proxy address is Zscaler pack file as dollar gateway or dollar gateway country gateway or gateway underscore FX. So in order to determine if the user is inside the corporate or outside the corporate, use the source IP of the internet breakout or the list of Zscaler Zen IPs as the source IP to identify whether the user is connecting from the corporate or outside the network. So the the important configuration here is, first we need to understand whether the from where the user is connecting. If the user is connecting from inside the corporate, then use the global SYN IPs to route the traffic. If they are outside the corporate, then the general return statement, a dollar gateway or gateway underscore FX will be used. At network level, when they are inside the corporate, if the destination IP is a global SYN IP, route the traffic to the tunnel. If my source IP is a managed user network, that means the subnets of users, and the port is 80 and 443, and the destination is not global SYN IP, then route the traffic to internet. So this rule is mandatory to handle the exceptions. Those destinations should have the exceptions on pack files. Rule number 3 is, if my destination port is not 80 or 443, route this traffic into the tunnel. This is recommended. Even if the cloud firewall feature is not purchased, Zscaler can simply bridge the traffic and give you the better logging information to you. If using Zscaler Zen IPs determined on net, either add internal DNS resolution for pack.zs cloud.net so that resolve global SYN IPs or statically route the traffic Zscaler pack to the tunnel. So this is mandatory because we are only sending the global SYN IPs to traffic towards the tunnel. So the second thing is we need to understand the pack files. Pack is hosted on the Zscaler cloud, so we need to route the pack request towards the Zscaler cloud. So in order to do that, either we need to resolve the pack, redirect the pack IPs towards the tunnel. Otherwise, we need to use local hosting, a local DNS resolution for pack.cloud.net and resolve any global SYN IPs. When you talk about global SYN IPs, there will be minimum 10 global SAN IPs which will be reachable from all the Zscaler cloud, so via the GRE or IPsec. In case of using managed laptop and they are connecting from outside the network, the Zscaler app to be deployed, the proxy address will be gateway underscore fx. So the how will you identify the whether the user is connecting from off trusted network or on network? That is will be based on the pack file configuration. In the pack file configuration, you need to have a default return statement which will send the traffic towards the gateway underscore fx. On top of that, but the default return statement, there will be a statement with source IPs or all internet breakouts of the corporate, otherwise all Zen node IPs. If they are using any managed iOS devices, deploy the Zscaler app for mobiles. If they are using Android devices, also deploy the Zscaler app for mobile devices. Always recommended to not do the SSL inspection for mobile devices, because when you do SSL inspection, the native applications will not work properly because of certificate spinning. In case of unmanaged devices like IoT, BOID, or guest users in the corporate LAN, you need to create a PBR, policy-based routing for the source IP ranges of unmanaged devices into the tunnel. Otherwise, you need to use a destination net for unmanaged traffic to send to the Zen IPs. There are two options to manage unmanaged IoT, BOID guest devices. Once the traffic is reaches to Zscaler, then Zscaler in the portal, you can create the subnet and disable the authentication SSL for the BOID and guest users for better functionality. The next best practices, let's say your corporate doesn't have the default route towards the internet. um, all the end user machines, all the endpoints having the proxy informations, all the traffic will be routed to the proxy will carry those traffic towards the internet. So in that scenario, only specific routes will be enforced towards the Zscaler, sorry, towards the corporate. So what we have to do, we have to route global SAN IPs only, and the pack file we have to use only the global SAN IPs as the return statements. So for managed desktop, laptop, or servers, if they are inside the corporate, deploy the Zscaler app with SSL certificates. Return proxy address in Zscaler app pack file is global SAN IP, and determine the user use a source IP with either of the listed internet breakout of egress IPs or the Zscaler SAN IPs to determine whether the user is connecting from the corporate or outside the corporate. Statically route the global SAN IPs into the tunnel. If the user is using Zen IPs to determine the OnNet, then we need to add Intel DNS resolution for like pack.zscloud.net, so it resolves the global SAN IP statically route the traffic to the service into the Zscaler tunnel. Managed laptop, when they are connected from Asia Road Warrior, use the Zscaler app. Return statement will be gateway underscore fx at the bottom for off-net users. Managed iOS and managed Android devices, the same scenario, deploy the app on devices and disable SSL inspection in order to avoid the SSL spinning and related issues. Unmanaged IoT, BOID, and guest users, when they are connected from the corporate, there are two options: create the PBR, source IP ranges of unmanaged devices into the tunnel, or DNet, the unmanaged traffic to Zscaler SAN IPs. These are recommended best practices when we are going with the ZF GRE tunnels from the routers. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.